Hey everyone, welcome back. Episode 5 of the Fast Motor Podcast. I'm your host Elijah, my dad Randy. Same as last time, we're going to kick off with just kind of a weekly racing update what's going on around motorsports, the stuff that we're following kind of throughout the week. So to get going with kind of races that happened, USAC Western States opened up out at Kern. Jet Yantis ended up getting the win after a really strong showing this winter in Tulsa. Brody Fusen was leading. He took a big tumble from the lead, and Yantis was able to edge out Brody Graham in the finish at the line at the end there. Superfest 125, super late models down in Cordele. Tristan McKee got the win. A little controversy there. Bubba Pollard got flat out dumped for the second big super late model race in a row. So gloves may be coming off there. So it'll be interesting to follow kind of his story as we go. Cars Tour West, they were out at Vegas. Taylor Mayhew got the win out there. Good races there. USAC and Cars Tour. You can watch both of those on Flow. Highly recommend. The coverage is great. Go watch them. Superfest, a lot of that super late model stuff is going to be on Racing America or Track TV. This one I believe is on Racing America. So you can go and watch all those there. Under the NASCAR stuff, trucks at Atlanta, race got shortened due to some weather coming in. They had to make sure they had to push. They had to get the Xfinity enough time to switch over there. Kyle Busch took home the win. That's his third straight at Atlanta. In the trucks, going to the O'Reilly Series, Sheldon Creed finally victorious after 15 runner-up finishes. Cool to see. He was pumped. So that was a really cool win. And Austin Hill got dethroned at the drafting tracks. And then Cup race at Atlanta, Tyler Reddick took some damage in a wreck earlier and was able to come back, rally, team stayed with it, and that car was fast. And with the torn off fender, it shows just how good that car was. So good race there again. Trucks and Cup both on Fox right now. Trucks will be on Fox all year. O'Reilly on the CW network. Again, great coverage all the way around. Then some headlines, the news. Elliott Sadler going to be making his racing return with the Smart Modified Tour at South Boston. Hermie Sadler is going to be running in the opener as well as a teammate to Luke Baldwin at Florence. So the Sadler brothers are back behind the wheel. Lee Pulliam, late model stock legend, both as a driver and a car owner. Recently he won at Martinsville last year, and then prior to that he was Butterbean's car owner. Now Laney Bice drives for him, and so he's going to run O'Reilly Series for Junior Motorsports at Martinsville this year. So that's a cool real racer, paid his dues. It's going to be fun to watch. Keelan Harvick signs a Toyota Racing Development deal. Toyota's going to come in on Rackley War, but he signed a long-term deal with them to be part of their driver development program. And then lastly, Jacob Denny and Gavin Miller will be splitting time in the Team AZ sprint car ride on the USAC circuit. So we didn't see them down in Florida. Was kind of curious as to what was going on with them. And now we have the news that says Jacob Denny and Gavin Miller, two midget hot shoes, are going to be swapping time in there. So that's kind of what I got for headlines and stuff. Dad, if there's anything you wanted to add or touch on as well.
No, I think the news is interesting with Keelan. I think we've seen that internationally where drivers get signed. I think Lewis Hamilton signed at age 11 at one point for his Formula One. So, talent continues to get younger. And Keelan, obviously it has done so much racing. It's not surprising that somebody begins to lock him up. I think, that his talent is obviously showing quickly. And he'll quickly rise and rise the right way. So, yeah, and it's good to see some midget guys go into the sprint car side and getting a good ride there. So that'll be fun to watch.
Yep.
And then, lots of drama already in the late models. Bubba Pollard, to me, is just that old school guy that would kind of put his arm around you and chat with you. And, he's racing against a lot of young guys coming up, and that's just a clashing of the worlds. So that'll be interesting to watch this year.
Yeah, and the two guys, I guess Zawalich was at Smyrna. He could have a talking to legally. But this one was off of Tristan McKee, and I don't know that he's old enough for Bubba Pollard to officially have a talk with. So the business might have to be done on the racetrack. So we'll see what kind of goes on there. So with our guest today, Dad, you have a better connection with him. So I'm going to let you kind of tee off the intro here.
Yeah. Ron Green has just a remarkable background in the sport. I first met Ron when he was with the United States Auto Club, and I started racing the Thursday Night Thunder Series, and Ron had obviously a deep passion for the sport immediately. But what comes with Ron is well educated, well spoken, an extreme professional. And just brought such a polish to the PR side of the business. And then by chance, we kind of both transferred to Charlotte at the same time. So you kind of were there trying to figure it all out as he worked for Charlotte Motor Speedway. And then I think Ron left and went back to Indy and worked at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And he's worked in government and politics and just has a broad view of the sport, which is, I think, exactly what we want for this show, is to talk about real topics and talk about them from a 360 perspective of making sure we represent everybody. And so I look forward to Ron's commentary. Like we talked previous, he doesn't have any ties any longer, so he can spoke a little unhinged, and we should have some fun. So please welcome Ron Green.
Ron, thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. Good evening, guys.
So I know that we kind of want to talk about a wide array of topics tonight. Mm-hmm. And Dad and I have been going back and forth for ever since we were initially supposed to have you on, which was a couple of weeks ago. And then, the sickness that has been going around and running rampant, as I know, because I've been working with youth kids. And I had a lot of cancellations of, hey, we're home from school sick today. So we're happy to get it rescheduled. And so we've been going back and forth, like I said, of just topics and all the different stuff we're going to cover because you've been involved in, everything. So, I think the first one we want to kind of cover is the media. And I want to go off of a recent headline from last week to kind of kick us off is there was a lot of talk after Daytona about Cletus McFarland and his deal in trucks and getting the ride, basically based on social media following alone. Mm-hmm. I was, watching some clips from another podcast, Door Bumper Clear. They were upset about it. You shouldn't have it. And they were like, you need to go through the system first. And so now that got a big uproar on social media. And so I just kind of wanted to get your take on is warranted and the system, is it needed? Are media drivers good for branding from a PR perspective? Kind of where's that balance and what are the two sides to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw a little bit debate on because the truck TV number was up and people were saying, oh, is that because of Tony or is that because of Cletus? There was that debate. So there is value in having him in a series without a doubt. I've never raced a race car. I've driven race cars, never raced a race car. So I don't know if I'm the best qualified to say he didn't have enough experience. I think he ran there last year in the ARCA series, did he not?
He did.
So maybe another year of ARCA experience before putting him on a super speedway. But I think there have been others that have gotten on that super speedway with less experience in a vendored car. So, I'm probably not the best person to say whether he should have been there or not. Certainly good for any series that he participates in because of his popularity and his energy that he brings. I don't think from a media standpoint, anybody should be faulted for calling him out. Because it's a legitimate concern, especially I think listening to the coverage where he lost it and how he lost it. Shouldn't have 9 times out of 10 a driver with experience wouldn't have would have saved it. So, there's some justification for some of the concerns.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is what are the qualifications?
Right.
Where do they begin and where do they end? And then
Right.
and it's probably not easy to do either.
Right.
A guy's a great midget racer and can wheel it on dirt, but we throw him on a super speedway. I remember the first time we ever decided the trucks might be going to super speedways. We went to Talladega with Dodge, and it was myself, Joe Ruttman, Bobby Hamilton, Stacy, Dennis Setzer, I think Bob Keselowski. Like, there was just a few of us, and so we decided we're gonna go. Like, there was no like go out, make single runs really or anything. So I'd never been on one, and my partner was Bobby Hamilton, and immediately off pit road all the way to the top of the wall. Track is dirty. There's just rubber flying and dust and tumbleweeds, and we were just wide open. And I thought, I can't ever leave him. Like, I can't say this is too much. So I just stuck in his tracks, and off we were going. And I think we ran 2:15 in the draft. Now there's only a couple of us, but still, nobody knew what the trucks would do. Nobody had any idea what that was going to look like. So, you had a little bit of learning, but then when we went back to Daytona, you had an entire field that had never ran that kind of stuff other than, the Ruttmans and the Hamiltons and, a few guys. And funny enough, I decided I would follow Ruttman and Hamilton because they had the most experience. And I thought I wanted everything to get panned out. And guess who crashed? Ruttman and Hamilton. Now, I don't think it was their fault, but they still got involved, and I got a radiator torn out. So yeah, it's hard. It's a guy that's, but again, like we're pulling him out, who probably has more desire. There's Pastrana that now has some starts, but when he got his first start, he hadn't ran that much. He hadn't really ran ovals.
Right.
And then you have, many of the others that have very little experience, and they've got there because of their social media sponsorships or sponsorships or money or what have you. I mean, they're going to have to identify core requirements only, and say, you have to do this, but
it's always been the nature of the sport. Money will get you a seat. It's been that way at Indy forever. You can pull an entry list from 75, 85, 95 to 2005 and find people that were there because they had the money to buy a seat. So I don't ever see that going away in motorsport. And that's the case with Cletus.
Yeah. He brings lots of eyes, and he brings new energy.
Absolutely.
Which is the right thing to do. But do you lose some of that energy if he goes away and runs the lower series ARCAs for the year and becomes kind of a staple? And it's not, his YouTube fans don't follow because now he's kind of done it and doing it. And I don't know. I think if he maintains his popularity on his social media channels, that fan base will still follow. Yeah.
You can compare him to the Kardashians, so whatever they touch turns to gold because of their following. So I think they'd follow him.
Yeah. I had a kind of a thought in terms of like because a lot of people are like, you got to go through the system, you got to pay your dues of like the pipeline. And I've thought like, okay, you could structure it as like you have to get, a win in ARCA, Cars Tour, Whelen Modifieds, USAC, Outlaw, High Limit, like a series. Like there's a certain list of series that you have to get a win in before you can move up. And that would be black and white criteria, cut and dry. But we just had this big lawsuit against NASCAR that was like, we need the teams to have more power and more control. The teams are going to choose who they're going to put in the rides. And they're going to choose somebody has some money, then they're going to be like, okay, well, we can't turn this down. This is marketing. This is business. Like, they got to take the money. And so if NASCAR comes out and we want this system in place, then we've now taken away that opportunity from the teams because the whole lawsuit was about NASCAR and the monopoly, and they're, the teams need to be able to make more money. And it's like, it seems like we can't have both ways. And so I was curious as to your stance on that from that point of view.
I mean, you're spot on. The teams are the ones that hire the drivers, and if you put in a set of rules that prohibits them from hiring who they want, it could affect the economics of that team for sure. But there's always imbalance, and I think that it will work itself out. We don't see this often. It happens every 5 to 10 years, but I don't think it's going to be a big issue, and I don't think they need to, because of this one instance, change too much.
Yeah, but that's what's interesting, right? Like, it's really interesting to talk about Cletus, but there's other social media influencers that are running there that are way off the pace. They're not like, I mean, we are at a new, NASCAR hadn't had it like IndyCar had it, right? IndyCar was very much, you brought money and you got a ride. NASCAR, in my era, which is still, that's 20 some years ago now, you were hired to drive. Right. And they had the sponsorship. And then it began to change towards the end of my career. I can remember having another conversation with Bobby Hamilton. He's like, what do you have? Do you have anything? I don't want a guy to pay me. And he said, but that kid's going to pay me enough money that if he crashes every race, I make like $1 million. But if you win every race, I lose $1 million. Like, what do you have? And we tried to work really hard on it and couldn't come up with it. And he had to do what he had to do. So, it's changed, and, and I hear you, Ron. It'll work itself out. It'll find its own level, so to speak. But Elijah, you bring up that point. Jimmy Johnson won 1 Busch race.
Yep.
And then won 7 Cup championships. Like, now he won the 1 race that you speak of, but
it was a fuel mileage.
That wasn't his style of car. And, and then can somebody get sponsorship for a Cars Tour race, but they can get sponsorship for a truck race, it's interesting as well. When you have to bring the money, where does your money want to spend their dime? And again, I think it goes back to, they're going to have whatever, a basic core. And then even, Indianapolis, Ron, like rookie orientation program, you can bring all the money you want. You still have to be signed off on. And it's like, let's go do that. Like, here's the core that you have to even get a NASCAR license, to even get on the track, and they could do it. You go to the 1 miles. That's the way it used to work, is Cletus wouldn't be able to go right to Daytona. He'd have to run a 1 mile track, and he'd have to show and prove himself. And then he could go to a 1.5 miles, and then he could go to a super speedway. Nobody got to go to the super speedways right out of the gate. So they have to choose. That's up to them. It's their business, and they get to do that. But it needs to go back to, people need to know what that core is, I believe.
Yeah, I've been curious as to if there were some set of requirements. And again, like you said, like, this is something that doesn't come around all that often. But we're talking about it because a really big one happened, and it's in the media forefront. If there were a set of criteria of, you have to spend X amount of time in, a certain series, would there be a possibility for sponsors to go back and maybe try to invest in some more talent younger? Or would we just see them go, it's not worth my money anymore, and we just see a bunch of sponsors pull out?
I don't think so. I think the teams that have the drivers that have the money have the money. I mean, I said it a while ago, like, they want to spend it here, but there's a tie to it somewhere, and they're going to support them somewhere.
For Randy's scenario that he talked about, how it used to be, where you had to run a 1 mile, then you had to run a 1.5 mile before you could get on a super speedway. The problem with Daytona is the first race of the year, and so many people build their budgets around Daytona, and it's the first race of the year. So if it were in the middle, that'd be great. You definitely check those boxes off after the first 2 months of racing before you get to Daytona. But with Daytona being the first race of the year, it's even hard to do that now when money is the driver.
Yeah. I also find it funny. Everybody was fine with Cletus for the most part till he got there and had a problem, and then all of a sudden it became a bigger issue.
Well, it's the same reason that everybody's all bashing Corey Day right now on like this kid's too young and he has no experience, and it's like, golly, the media is so like there's people that just are so focused on one group of motorsports. And again, why we do this, why we have these conversations is because like we want to bring so much together, but it's like they're like, he's not ready and Hendrick's wasting their money and blah 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 blah. Kyle Larson 2.0, like, no, he's not. And it's like he has this whole world of talent, but he doesn't have the experience running a long race. So he is having to learn on live television on a national series that's on network TV. So it's a tough balance.
I think the sport's seen that, you know, I think we've seen those drivers come along and they are their, you know, one, he's given the keys to the kingdom to one of the greatest teams there is, which is Hendrick. I'll guarantee if you go find any hatred towards Day, they also dislike Kyle Larson.
Some, yeah. There was a lot after Atlanta because he caused a couple wrecks.
Yeah, I mean he made a mistake. You know, so did Ross Chastain. He dumped the leader. I mean, he's going for the lead too. It just wasn't on the last lap. So I mean, you know, there's plenty of mistakes being made. You know, it's just who makes them.
Yeah,
Corey Day has, you know, but it brings up a point, and I don't want to talk over Ron because he has so much wisdom. We get to talk every week. But I was listening to a little bit of a commentary about Kyle Larson, and they were like, you know, his spotter said inside, and he just came. And Kyle says, hey, I thought I was only too wide. So when he said, you know, inside, you know, I thought once I cleared the one, there was nobody else there. And I just came over. And so somebody was talking about, you know, how you catch the cushion and then drive off the bottom. Because he said, basically, I was trying to cut some track. So I'd make speed by cutting the track like you would off of a cushion. Yeah. And I think Kyle Larson, much like Corey Day, are such seat of the pants racers. Mm-hmm. And so it's car feel, it's what they can see. And the spotter's there and they're listening to them and they're working with them, but they're pretty much reactionary kind of drivers because that's what sprint cars or midgets or any of that is. Like, you know, whatever you're given at that time is how you drive it. And I think that's Kyle Larson. I think he's a great race car driver. I mean, he's a phenomenal race car driver. And that's why he can jump in so many cars is because he does it by feel. But when you get into an Indy car or you get into this level of NASCAR, that kind of technical driving style is not going to be him. So you're going to have these times where he makes a mistake because he drives super hard. He doesn't, you know, he wouldn't, I don't think he'd be a fast sports car racer. I don't know that he'd be a great one because they say go 80%. And I don't know that guy has 80%. I think it's 100%, which is what makes him fun to drive. I mean, or fun to watch. So
here's my take on all this that we're talking about is I think motorsports is in a great place because there's so much passion. You know, if we weren't still talking about Daytona 2 weeks after it, then it you know, the sport wouldn't be where it needs to be. I mean, there's so much passion in it right now and passionate youth in it, which is exciting. One of my longtime friends in the sport, and I just disagreed with him about 5 years ago. He said, there's no youth coming into the sport. And I said, you got to open your eyes. I mean, you look at the Tulsa shootout, the health of karting, the late model series, you know, how many 18 and unders are running late models? And they're bringing a youthful fan base with them and a passionate fan base that communicates on social media. It's just going to help grow the sport. Yeah.
I mean, the sports car series, SRO, you know, and all of the GT4 stuff is all on Switch. Mm-hmm. You know, you're watching it on a whole different, sorry.
That's not me.
It's me. so it's streaming devices. Like you can watch racing on streaming, and not just streaming on TV, but streaming on your your PlayStations and your
Right.
different series, and where people are finding it is really unique. Yeah. So
I was thinking about this weekend, that last year you could watch every lap of every practice session, qualifying session, and race in IndyCar. I think that was the first time ever on network TV.
Wow.
And then on Flow, you could watch every practice session of every USAC midget sprint car Silver Crown practice and qualifying sessions. That's just, for me, that's mind boggling.
Yeah.
When we hope just to see a race or two on a weekend, now there's so much racing to be consumed. And that's why I say I think the sport is in a great position as it's been in years.
Yeah. What did you think about Tony coming back to run the trucks? So you worked for Tony for how long?
I mean, I've known him since we were both in our early 20s. He came into USAC just after I'd started there, much like you. I thought it was great. He seemed genuinely excited about it. Yeah. I think he probably would have liked to race somewhere else besides Daytona. He's never been a fan of those kind of tracks, though he's had success there. But I thought that was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. He generally looked like a happy Tony.
Yeah.
That was good to see.
Yeah. He's looked like that the last.
Yeah.
Ever since he got out of the seat of his Cup car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he's been living a good life. So, and speaking of kind of that, because like we talked, we're talking about the NASCAR Truck Series from Daytona 2 weeks after it happened. Mm-hmm. Like you said, I don't remember the last time that kind of conversation's been happening. Right. Like it's like the crowd turnout looked like it was a little bit better than it has been, and live, and then obviously the TV ratings were up. But we're talking about two different sides. We're talking about Cletus, who's got this whole young, and I don't know how young he is, but he's got a very young fan base. He's got a huge following. He's kind of this new age social media influencer, bringing that in. Then you do have people that were there, probably to watch Tony, because he brings in that kind of old guard, the veterans, the history aspect of the sport. I think it's really cool that we can tie those two together. I kind of wanted your opinion, because me being kind of young and passionate about motorsports, I see a lot of young people who are really excited about it, but don't really know any of the history, or don't really care that much about the history. So I kind of wanted your opinion on like what's the importance of that history, and how can that be better marketed towards a young
it's definitely important. When I was the PR director for the Indy Racing League, and anytime I would go into a market, I always tried to take a driver with a name, whether it was Eddie Cheever, Lion Dyke, Al Unser, once we got him, and pair them with a younger driver, a driver with a lesser name, to get their names tied together, and help build that new driver's profile by connecting him with an established name. It's very important. History, in any sport, history's important, whether it's baseball, where your background is, Elijah, or basketball. I still on social media today see more clips about Larry Bird and Michael Jordan than anything else right now, and that's tying history to that sport.
It's an interesting side, because even the sport's changed, right? When you talk about the young talent, I mean, we talked about it weeks ago, where you had the old school drivers, and we talked about it even here, where a young driver dumps one of the old veterans, but it's kind of interesting, and I'll tie it to, I heard a conversation about Dale Earnhardt earlier today on the radio, and it was like, is Carson Hocevar like Dale Earnhardt? And my view on that, is so different in the way of Dale Earnhardt dumped you when he needed to win, and he wasn't erratic, right? Like he was a planned assassin, so to speak, where he did what he needed to do. And then he could charm you afterwards where you were best friends. Like he was going to go be that guy. I think that's what made Dale so good is he was that guy. But you have this, a younger generation that's trying to find their way. And the truck series is very different than the truck series when I was there. And I think racing in general is changing so quickly, right? Where for years and years and years, in USAC, cars were a little, there was a group, the Silver Crown cars were a little older, and then there was kind of the new cars coming in, and there was a kind of a changing of the guard that had been accepted forever, and then you kind of had the new generation of cars come in, then you had younger drivers and midgets, Mel Kenyon and Vogler and Stewart, and then you had, but that was kind of a tail end of an era where you kind of drove the same, and then came Drinan driving a whole new different way at IRP, and you kind of had this controversy, right? Danny was always a controversy with car design and how he drove, and then you had the trucks when I was there, which was really everybody who wanted to make it to NASCAR but had no pathway. Then all of a sudden had an opportunity, and now you have very young, very aggressive, very different kind of mindset. Like sports really changing. And are we, it's interesting you say that, Ron, with the younger guard, but I think we could do more with that, right? I think we could still, like, how are we telling the stories? I just don't see, I see rinse and repeat in a lot of what we do. And now I see, and this is the view I really wanted to hear from you is, I feel like media personalities have become bigger in the sport. Like they're become known entities. They got a podcast and now they have opinions. And the only way you get somebody to watch your podcast is probably bring up real controversial topics and have a really strong opinion because it gets clicks. I remember a reporter a few years ago, and he wrote a headline that was kind of inflammatory towards a driver, and it was kind of out there, and they asked him on the radio, like, the article didn't really reflect what the headline was, and he's like, I'm paid for clicks. I have to get somebody to the spot, because if not, I don't get paid any longer. And from you, I think you're a person of high integrity, and now we see social media having such a big role in the media side of politics. I mean, I watched our governor say the F word the other day. Like which is just it's absurd for me that we have Twitter wars in politicians, and then we have I get it from the fans' perspective on the racing, but you even have the media putting out just not questionable content, but edgy content that is it's digging for responses, right? Because that's how they're paid. And I feel like we're selling out. Is that how you see it?
Everyone's trying to make it in the sport. And well, first back up just how much media has changed since I started in the business. It was a 24-hour news cycle back then. So if something happened in the race or after the race, you had that evening to massage it, to spin it, to work with the reporter, have them talk to the driver. Now there's no such thing as a news cycle. It's all instantaneous. So it's harder to manage negative situations, for one. And then you're dealing with, like you said, a group of media that if they want to do what they want to do, they've got to produce clicks. And do you not want a Jeff Gluck covering the sport? I think he's added value to the sport in a lot of ways. So it's it's still evolving, and it's going to continue to evolve as technology evolves, as social media evolves. but there's definitely a place for that in the sport. I think it's important. You're doing a podcast. You're a journalist now. In some ways, you'd be viewed as that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah.
What do you think the role of a PR person's has changed since it is spontaneous, since it is immediate, since it is, there's so many,
Right.
I know, what I come from, we used to go to the auto shows and there would be the debut of new cars at the auto shows. And the media would just, in Detroit or LA or Chicago, there would be this flock of media, journalists that go to the debut and the model launch and now it's a lot of influencers. Like it's just completely changed.
Right. So, I have to preface this by saying I haven't worked in the sport since 2013, and a lot has changed from a team PR rep responsibility, from what I understand. Back then, post race, it was important to turn out a good press release summarizing your team's participation in that event, accompanying it with a good picture, and sending it out to your sponsors, to your network of media, whether it was your driver's hometown media, your team's hometown media. That was priority number one. Now you were a one-man band. You went back to the team hauler or back to the hotel and you typed out your story and you got everything done. Now you're working with one or two social media people. You're working with a photographer, a videographer, because a good social media post after the race is more important than that story that I used to produce. So from that standpoint, it's changed a great deal. Where people are caught off guard is they don't have people on their team, their PR teams, experience in crisis situations. As recent as 3 or 4 years ago, a team had an issue with a driver injury, and they called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, we're thinking about saying this. What should we do?" Because who they had on their team, they didn't have that. They were good at posting a great picture or video, but they didn't have the crisis experience under their belt. So that's across any form of PR. Well, I see it in government, corporate PR. People are turning these social media professionals loose, representing their company, but they don't have a true PR background.
Right.
And tweets are getting deleted, or X comments are getting deleted left and right, and you shouldn't have to delete something like that. So that's where it's changed so much. Is the social media side of it has just evolved just since I've gotten out of the sport. I mean, I try to follow it enough. I see what's important, but
well, you can look at who you mentioned, Jeff Gluck. Like, look at his rise, right? Yeah. Because he's good in that. I'm not saying he's not good on a lengthy. I don't read the Athletics, so I don't see this long. But he's good socially. He's interactive. Now he has the podcast. He I'm excited for the podcast because I always really liked his insights. Now I feel like they're short and they're a little bitey, but I bet on the podcast he goes into more of a review of why he said what he said and how he believes. Because I know his line of thinking is along the line of mine, but you can only watch so many podcasts, and everybody should be watching this one, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, this
we're going to change that. We're going to help change that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So,
yeah, I will kind of piggyback on that and see what your take on it. As like you talked about the transition of PR from true PR to more of a social media base. Even with like he says, like all the media, even the companies like Dirty Mo Media has got a million different little outlets with Door Bumper Clear, the Dale Jr. Download, Dale and his wife's podcast, and then they've got Gluck and Jordan that have their tear down after the race. And that's just one media company. You got the radio and all that stuff too. I will say, in terms of like the I don't want to say lower divisions, but less covered divisions, such as like high limit stuff, USAC, late model stuff that's not on network television all the time. Most of the social media stuff that I see there is pretty positive. When you go to the NASCAR, which is like the pinnacle because it's on network TV, and it's got the most in America. It's got the highest viewership ratings of motorsports. Mm-hmm. Most of what I see on social media is not positive. It's negative. It's against NASCAR. And
there's never any glamour working for a sanctioning body. Yeah. You're always the bad guy.
Yep.
Your goal is to not be a story. Your goal, and to me, they haven't been a story this year so far. It's been the racing. It's been the on-track product. So they're doing things right, in my opinion. But yeah, I've always said it's the nature of racing fans. They're some of the most passionate, and even before social media, I worked for Speed Sport News in the late 80s. And you would see the letters that would come in from fans. They were just so long and passionate. And it's not any different now. It's just they have a different channel to vent their passion.
Yeah, it's definitely changed.
Well, and it's everything, right? Like you go on Reddit channels, all the different channels that talk about racing is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. You have your World Outlaws, you have your High Limit, you have probably 15 different NASCAR channels that you can talk about, from the wives and the girlfriends of drivers, where they just talk about them, or posting who's dating who, or and it brings the female aspect into the sport. Like I'm not for sure that's all who's there, but it's but it's broad, and I think you can find your kind of fandom, in your own group of people who like or dislike. And you're right, Ron. When you look at, I don't know that I've ever been part of a sanctioning body. USAC was just nonstop hatred towards USAC, right? Like when I was there.
USAC was a 4-letter word. I heard that so many times.
Yeah. And it was, you couldn't, you guys couldn't do anything right, other than is still the premier kind of sanctioning body in open wheel racing in the country. Mm-hmm. But everything was wrong, and everybody had an opinion of how they could write. But it was always kind of a sole opinion of why, that would help them if they did it the right way. And then NASCAR, it's funny to see this fans' reaction because they don't remember how it was. Like when I ran there, you kept your mouth shut, you did your good deed, you were treated fairly, and off you went. And now I feel like NASCAR's listened so much to the fans. They really put, and I think they lost themselves. And I love that it's back to hell yeah. And this is their new campaign. This is who we are. Like us or don't like us, but this is who we are. And we're that raw scenario. And I kind of like it because it's like, this is what the racing is going to be. Either enjoy it or, and you can mouth off about it, but it is what it is. And I think that's good again, because that's what it was for so long. It's like, we are, this is how we run.
Yeah. You mentioned about listening to the fans, and we can back up to why I think sanctioning bodies were getting desperate and trying to figure out, you were getting into NASCAR right at its zenith when it was a phenomenon. A few other sports experienced the kind of growth we saw from like 1990 to 2005. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, the parachutes came out, and it was It was floating down. Same with IndyCar. A lot of people blame that on the 2 series, and definitely that impacted it. But people were getting desperate to figure out what can we do to get the fans back. Well, I think one of the areas there were 2 areas the sport really screwed up, and this is just my opinion. In the mid 90s, you had the France family, ISC, and Bruton Smith and SMI both took their companies public. And then shortly after that, CART, the owners of CART, which were the team owners, took Champ Car public. And all of a sudden, you are not just accountable to the fans, you're accountable to shareholders.
Yeah.
And those shareholders aren't racing fans.
Yeah.
And then about that same time is they started chasing that TV rating. And that's where it's really, and to this day, they still chase that TV rating. And we're starting Sunday races at 4 p.m. Well, what's that do to the ticket buying fan who wants to go to Daytona and still be able to drive home to Charlotte or to Atlanta that night? We've gotten so far away from the sport, has gotten so far away of thinking of the fans in the stands.
Yeah.
Fortunately, none of those groups are publicly owned anymore. That was greed. There was so much greed in the sport in the 90s and early 2000s. And fortunately, and again, my opinion, they're not public companies anymore, and they can make the decisions that are important for the sport. But like you said, they were desperate. They were listening to the fans, and I'm a fan, but the fans' whims change every day with the wind.
Right.
And that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
That's what they were doing. So it's good to see some, and we're seeing it in IndyCar and in NASCAR, some stability in leadership, which is important. Rules. There's always going to be chasing that fine balance of what's the best race car. and as long as technology keeps making the cars faster and safer, we're going to be chasing that balance.
Yeah.
I want to ask because kind of as we touched on earlier, racing as a whole is in a really great spot right now.
Mm-hmm.
IndyCar is something that seems like it's lost a little bit of popularity, and maybe in the recent years it's kind of gained it back.
Mm-hmm.
What does IndyCar, in your opinion, what does IndyCar need to do to kind of get back as a premier, more viewed series?
It's the whole landscape of sports and television is changed. When, quote, the glory days of the late 80s of the sport, 60,000 fans at an oval race was huge. Now 60,000 fans in these massive stadiums that we have it's a perception problem.
Yeah.
I used to tell there's a longtime PR person. He was an intern for me at the Speedway, and he's been very successful in the sport for years. But I used to always tell him, Joe, there was a famous Barbara Mandrell song that was, I was country when country wasn't cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to say in the late 90s, I was a racer before being a racer was cool. And I remember, the sport just, it didn't have the popularity that everyone thought it had.
Right.
And it's as popular now. NASCAR's not. I mean, NASCAR, it finally leveled off to what it is. But, Randy, you couldn't go out in the backyard and race cars with Elijah, but you go in the backyard and pitch and catch with him. Our sport's different. and our fan base is always going to be different. I think it's leveled off from the zenith that we saw in the late 90s. And I think it's got a good future with
And it's
all the
better
youth
for the
coming in.
fans. I mean,
What's that?
It's even better for the fans right
Oh,
now.
without a doubt.
I mean, when I was in the trucks, and this is the late 90s, early 2000s, we would go to a truck race and we'd race Friday, and we'd have to get the hotel for like 5-night minimum. And paying, I remember at a roadway inn in Dover, Delaware, where there was plywood screwed to the ceiling, and we were paying close to $400 a night.
Right.
And you had a 5-night minimum. We were only there for 2 nights.
Right.
It didn't matter. And fans had to do the exact same thing.
Right.
I think that's why, so it's so much better for them as a fan experience. I remember going to Atlanta. Atlanta was 5 hours to get in, because of the 2-lane roads.
Right.
And then 5 hours to get out. I mean, you were a day just getting into the racetrack from a couple miles away. Like
I used to go up to the Michigan IndyCar race, and you just dreaded it because getting in and out of there. And again, there's probably only 50 to 60,000 people there.
Yeah.
But it was a 4 to 5 hour experience just to get back to the interstate, to get home to Indianapolis.
Ron,
the fan experience is so much better than it's ever been.
Elijah brings up IndyCar, and IndyCar has always had this interesting kind of, the fans didn't know the drivers, right? So my era coming up, USAC, when the IRL happened, we're going to get some American drivers that people know, and we're going to build on the American driver scenario. NASCAR was thriving, and they thought it was because everybody knew the drivers, and there was a connection. And in today's era, we have probably a better way to tell the driver story than ever, right? Like, who are these guys? What makes them stand out? I don't think we're doing that well anywhere in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, and I don't know that it's on the sanctioning body. I don't know who it is. This is where the Cletus comes in. Cletus, you know exactly who he is. He's unique. You know who the guy is.
Mm-hmm.
Drive to Survive jumped up Formula One in the U.S., tenfold, if not more, right? The popularity has skyrocketed. And I think it skyrocketed because people connect to these drivers.
Right.
Lando, like, oh my gosh, he's such, he's having fun. He's cute. Like, and Charles Leclerc, he's got his little dog, and there's a connection, and people want a connection, right? People want to be able to, racing's not like a team sport. Like, if you like the Eagles because you're from Philly, or you like the Colts because you're from Indy, you don't get tied to a player. But in racing, you get tied. And I always said, I'm not a big fan of other sports. Like, I don't go, oh my gosh, Dodgers are in the World Series, I'm going to live and breathe for the next 7 days because of if they win or lose. I don't really care, because I'm always connected to a player here, a player here, a player here, because of, we know their stories and we follow them. And I feel like that's a little bit from where I came from racing, is because, we like Kyle Larson because Kyle Larson came from what we came from, and you watch what he does behind the wheel of a car, and it's just raw and natural and great. But IndyCar, I think, this will sound horrible, I think they're doing the worst job of telling their unique stories about who these drivers are. I don't even know half of them, and I'm a race fan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when Indy comes around, man, I only know the guys that I knew from a couple years ago, but like some of the new talents. And so where is that work? Is that because the PR people are not like what you were? It's lost in the white noise of our world that you don't play? Is it nobody wants to do a series like Drive to Survive? I mean, NASCAR tried to do it, but they didn't dig into the people, right? You've got to get connected. So
to me, IndyCar is, and it's not anything they have done. It's the nature of that business model, but the turnover rate in drivers is what hurts that sport. And during the zenith of NASCAR, you had sponsor equity, same sponsor, same driver. You know, you walk into a Winn-Dixie and you're going to see a stand-up of Mark Martin.
Right.
You're going to see walk into a Target or walk into a Kroger and see a stand-up of Darrell Waltrip in a Tide uniform. You had the equity of sponsors and drivers. And, you know, NASCAR's lost out a great deal. You mentioned about when Month May rolls around, you don't know half the drivers on IndyCar. I'm the same way with NASCAR because I don't follow as closely as I used to. So I look through the list. I'm like, well, who are some of these guys? But for IndyCar, you know, you just look at the lineup for St. Pete this weekend and look at the lineup of St. Pete 2 years ago, and I would wager that half the field almost weren't there.
Yeah.
So there's your problem. It's the turnover, but it's a series where half the drivers need to bring money, and you're going to have that. And
It's interesting you say that because even the sponsors were equity. Right.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and that's something that NASCAR's lost. Instead of having Mark Martin in the Winn-Dixie car on Saturday and the Valvoline car on Sunday, now Mark Martin would have 10 different sponsors on Saturday and 10 different sponsors on Sunday throughout the year. So that look is not the same. You know, I think probably the only one carrying it almost all year is Kyle Larson with Hendrick.
He also has Valvoline too.
Yeah, but
he's
Ty Gibbs with Monster and a couple.
But he's got, like, you know, Mavis tires and all this stuff, and then Alex Bowman with Ally. His doesn't. His is usually like Ally with something else, or Blaney with Menards and something.
But very few, right?
Again,
not like it was.
And they still bounce around. It's not consistent. That's interesting. I've never thought of it from that perspective. Because, like, you know, when I grew up, Tony Stewart was Home Depot. Jimmy Johnson was Lowe's. Carl Edwards was Office Depot, you know.
Exactly.
And it really has changed.
In IndyCar, you had, you know, Rick Mears with Pennzoil. And you had the Marlboro drivers for Penske.
Yep.
So that's a part of the sport that, again, I don't know what IndyCar can do to fix that. You can't make the owners keep the same driver in the seat for 2 or 3 years. You know,
they do a great job doing autograph signings. They try to really connect. They do more than they've ever done, right? So Ron, like as we begin to close out, I know Elijah will have some quick rapid fire questions, but tell us about your greatest experience in racing. What is your memory that is just like,
wow. I've got so many great ones. A couple simple ones. These are just simple ones, but from a kid from a small town in Indiana who just had a dream of working in racing, to walking through a very quiet garage area at Charlotte Motor Speedway in between two transporters, and around the corner comes the king in his cowboy hat, and he says, "Hey, Cap, how's it going?" Just something that simple to me. It was like, wow. That's one. And then our friend Tony Stewart was very famous for is this a PG rated podcast?
You can
Go.
Yeah. Tony's always famous for ball checking somebody. And it was like a badge of honor if you got ball checked by Tony. And I'm standing in the garage area one day, didn't even see him coming, and got ball checked. And that was a badge of honor that, you know, and that was also a sign that he liked you. So those are two silly ones. Cause I've just had, you know, the list of drivers that I've been fortunate to work with, starting with Petty, AJ Foyt, Tony, Randy Tolsma, Jeff Gordon, the Andretti's, Michael Schumacher. I've just been very, very blessed in my career to exceed any expectations that I had.
Yeah. It's funny how.
Did you notice I slipped you in there?
I did. Just, I mean, right. A couple of names before Schumacher. So like, I always find it funny that we would go watch Formula One. We'd get up early to go watch Formula One, and I think some British pub with Doug Bowles. And and people who don't know who Doug is, I don't even know all his titles now, but basically Doug single-handedly brought enthusiasm back to the Indy 500 to the level it is today from yesteryear. And he did a lot of great work, but because he's just passionate, right? But he was a passionate racer then. And I don't even know what Doug, I know he ran the little Formula Fords kind of, there, but I don't even know if he had a job in the sport when we were doing that. And his dad was a judge.
So a little story about Doug. Doug and I worked together right out of, he was a couple of years behind me, but basically both of us right out of college worked in the Indiana House of Representatives. Same office. We had a poster of Eddie Cheever on the wall in our office. And every February, we'd go out on the day of the twin 125s because they were usually run at like noon and 1 and we'd go out to be able to get MRN on some channel, and we had to go out on the interstate and drive around to pick it up. I think it was a station out of Kokomo, and we took a long lunch to listen to the 125s in our car. But yeah, Doug did some kart racing, and then some Pro V racing, dabbled in club racing for the most part.
Yeah.
His dad is one of the original employees of USAC. His dad, who was a retired judge, was a media relations guy at USAC. So that's where Doug really got his passion for motorsports.
Oh, I mean, he's been it and lived it and is iconic with his what he's done in these last few years. So been good. So Elijah, you have some rapid fire questions?
Yep, rapid fire questions. I've told every guest we ask them to everybody.
You didn't tell me we were going to do this.
Yeah, they're just quick, racing, pretty for the most part racing related. Quick, show the personality a little bit.
Okay.
First one, favorite track.
Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Good one. Again, every person we've had on here has said a track that is on my bucket list to go to, and as a diehard race fan, it's a crime that I haven't been to these. But they're all during baseball season. So
if you come up this May, I'll show you around.
My cousin's wedding is that weekend. It's on that day this May.
Okay.
That was the original plan. Next May is very likely. Most memorable race that you've watched.
I'm not saying this to flatter your dad, but I tell people all the time that those 4 or 5 laps of you racing Mike Bliss at Raceway Park, hands down, some of the most exciting racing I've ever seen. I still get chills about that. Gosh, I've seen so many great ones in person. I was working for USAC, and I was along the pit wall when Al Unser beat Scott Goodyear, and I still get chills about that. Those two stand out. But, when you work in short track racing for all those years, you get spoiled.
Yeah.
Every Friday night, you think you just saw the greatest sprint car race you've ever seen until next week.
Yeah.
It's just like the Chili Bowl. It's like, how can that heat race, you can't beat that heat race I just watched. And each one's so good. So it's hard to say. Sorry, being long-winded on my answer.
Not good. Yeah, Dad's race. Slip and slide, dip and dive. Slip and slide, dip and dive. Your racing hero growing up?
Mine was Lloyd Ruby, the quiet Texan. Should have won the race, I don't know, 3 times, I think. The 500, obviously. And it was such an honor to get to meet him at Texas Motor Speedway when we did a press conference to promote the IndyCar race, and Eddie Gossage brought some legends of Texas back for the press conference. So it was AJ, Jim McElreath, and Lloyd Ruby. So that was an exciting day for me.
Did Lloyd Ruby run the Fastmasters race?
I think he did. Crashmasters.
Yeah. So talking about my race at IRP, I think it's the only race that I ever heard the crowd through my helmet while we were racing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, that's how it roared. Like, I mean, it was just crazy. So, yeah.
Best track food.
Ooh, that's a good one. There's a little dirt track in southern Ohio called Portsmouth Raceway. It's one of those that like floods every spring. The Ohio River comes up, so it's got great dirt because every year it gets a new layer of dirt put on it. But the wife of the man that owned the track made a lot of the food because they didn't get huge crowds, and it was just great food. That's one of the things I remember from Portsmouth was the food there.
Home cooking at a racetrack. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But
I do have to have every May. I do have to have a tenderloin at the Speedway. I feel it for about 2 weeks after. It's just tradition, the traditions at the Speedway. I've got to have at least one tenderloin.
Traditions keep it going. Your favorite current series to watch?
USAC sprint cars still. Now I will tell you. I posted about this last summer. The qualifying product that IndyCar has combined with the TV production, to me, is so exciting. Watching, Ray Hall could be at the top 6 and just watching him slide down those last 40 seconds. To me, that's compelling TV. So from a TV standpoint, I never miss the IndyCar road course and street racing qualifying. I think that's a great product. But for me to pay money, go watch sprint cars at Bloomington. Bloomington is my second favorite track, and I love taking a lawn chair down there and watching the sprint cars at Bloomington.
Not on the list. Who's your favorite current USAC sprint car driver to watch?
Ooh. I think CJ Leary's exciting. He definitely stands on it. They've got a lot of stars. I say CJ because he's from Greenfield, which is close to where I'm from. I watched him in quarter midgets, not quarter midgets, TQs, I guess it was. I'd probably say CJ.
For the Indiana local.
Mm-hmm.
And then last one, just a couple of these are for drivers. Favorite hobby outside of racing?
I have 2. You can't tell it by my dad bod, but I am a part-time fitness instructor. I teach indoor cycling classes. So that's number 1. And 2 is going to live music events. I go to a lot of concerts. One of the benefits of being in the sport so long is I've developed great friendships, and one is Dr. Pat Sullivan. He was a great announcer, and next to Donald Davidson, I think he is the best historian of the sport of auto racing, not just open wheel racing. The guy has covered everything. But anyway, we share a love of music, and Pat and I go to several shows a year together, and those are very enjoyable evenings. So live music and teaching spin classes.
You still a lover of hair bands? Weren't you kind of pretty heavy metal?
I've been known to dress up as a hairband. One of my favorite hairband artists for Halloween.
I'll add an extra one on there since some of these were like meaning behind car number or upcoming season goal. Best concert you've gone to then?
Oh, best concert I've gone to. I still say it was my very first true rock and roll concert. It was 1980. I saw Van Halen at what was known as Market Square Arena. The arena doesn't exist anymore. And I had a fro, a head of hair as big as most of the rock stars. And it was natural. No perm in mine. It was a natural fro.
It's an accomplishment. All right. Well, that kind of wraps us up. Ron, thanks for sharing your opinions and
enjoyed it
on the races. And like I said, I said it last week to Shane Carson when we had him on here. But we've said it to every guest. We got to have you back on because there was some stuff that I had down that I wanted to get to that would have probably eaten up another 20 or 30 minutes, and we don't need to go all night. So
no, without a doubt, I'd love to do it again. I just feel like we barely touched the stuff we could talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So awesome. Thank you
guys. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely. All right. Yep. See you guys all next week. Again, every Wednesday, Spotify and YouTube. We'll be live every Wednesday morning around 7 a.m. So I'll see you guys next time.